Popcorn theologians, listen to me. The human world, it's a mess. But watching movies from a Christian worldview is better than consuming entertainment mindlessly. You gotta find the themes, like this. And you gotta receive, reject, and redeem, like this.
Yeah, so don't be a guppy.
Well, we better get cracking. I'll sing us into the episode. Wah, 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 wah.
In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Under the sea, nobody beat us, fry us and eat us in fricassee. We what the land folks love to cook. Under the sea, we off the hook. We got no troubles, life is the bubbles under the sea.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to episode 295 of Popcorn Theology. I'm Kat.
And I'm Maddy.
And I'm Becky.
And this is actually, I think, a first for Popcorn Theology. It's the all-women edition.
All mermaids.
All mermaids. I apologize. Yes, it's the all mermaids edition of Popcorn Theology, and we are indeed talking about The Little Mermaid. So before we get to any ads, and as we start this whole thing off, what are your spoiler-free thoughts? Do you guys have any kind of history or experience with this particular film? Maybe with Disney in general? I can start. I have a soft spot for The Little Mermaid. I really do. It came out when I was in high school. I remember the music is just fantastic. The Menken-Ashman pairing worked so well for so many movies. The animation was phenomenal. And honestly, The Little Mermaid kind of kicked off a Disney revolution of sorts. Like in the 90s, there was a string of phenomenal hits. And this one was the first. And I think for me, it was weird. I'd kind of forgotten my love for it a little bit until I saw the trailers for this new version coming out. And when they started playing Part of Your World, I was like, oh, I love that so much. So I enjoyed the visuals of it. I think it was beautiful. The cast was talented. I thought Ariel, Ursula, Scuttle were all well cast, well performed. I think any quibbles that I might have with this particular production are primarily that it was an hour longer than the original. The original's only an hour 27. This one was 2:15, and I kind of came out of the theater thinking I felt like I got the exact same movie. So then I kind of go back to my old curmudgeonly, like, why did they have to update it at all? Sort of thing. I felt like I got some of the same beats, and I don't know. I love the original so much that there were elements where it almost feels like some of this live action remake thing is almost a weird slap in the face to animation. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm reading that wrong, but it sometimes feels like, well, now that we can do it as live action, it's better, it's more mature, it's more whatever. And I'm not sure that I fully agree with that. So those are kind of my initial thoughts. And shout out, Colleen Atwood was the costumer, and I pretty much love anything that she does. So those are some of my initial thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. In some respects, like, you just can't do certain things with live action that you can do with animation, because I kind of felt the same way about certain things. And again, it wasn't a terrible movie. It just, like you said, it was kind of like, It had a few different things, but not enough to make me like super excited that, oh, they did something totally different, totally new. You know, it felt like The Little Mermaid, which I guess is a good thing. So,
I'm gonna start being the different one already. I absolutely loved
Go
it,
ahead, Becky.
and like,
No, that's great.
that's fine.
but I mean, yeah, because Little Mermaid came out when I was like 4, the original one, and I probably didn't see the movie in the theater, but like, you know, we had it on tape, and I feel like it was basically my whole personality, like wanting, like yeah, that's just been like my idol my whole life, right? And so it's really just resenting that I don't even have red hair and that I have to be a human. Because I mean, that's one thing I don't agree with her. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, yeah, life's better under the sea, dude. But but yeah, I absolutely loved it because I thought that. Well, I also always love remakes, like, because I don't see it as like one has to be better than the other. It's like I like having more of the same thing in different formats, right? Like, I don't know, like sometimes you want tacos, sometimes you want taquitos. It's like the same thing that's different. So like it's fine. So it's not the exact same. And I really loved how it didn't try to be overly realistic, because it was very fantastical still, but it had so many things. Like, I loved the way that the designs of all the characters, like Flounder being tiny and how dumb he looked when he was on the boat, and like it was great because fish look dumb, so it should be. And like like yeah, like the way like Sebastian and Ursula was my absolute favorite. The way that she was designed, this like kind of floating back as she moved, like an octopus does, and like I don't know. It was also great because I trust casting directors, but I was just like, Melissa McCarthy, this doesn't seem right. But she was not Melissa McCarthy. She was Ursula. It was so good.
No, she did a great job. I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I didn't expect her to be good either, but when I saw it, actually, I think she brought some of the more cartoony villain to it, which I kind of enjoyed. You know, it's like she was evil and she loved it.
Yeah, it was like a good like kind of balance where she wasn't like overly scary, but yeah, it was kind of like she was silly. Like it's also being a comedic actress, and she was really good at those like tiny little like what like
yeah.
And I don't know, just overall I love the design of the things, and I just like having more of the same, and I love both in different ways because and then I watched it in IMAX, and then I watched it in 3D Dolby, and
oh wow,
like the 3D on that is just so good because it's just like I
didn't even think about seeing it in 3D. That could be actually
me
really
neither.
cool.
Yeah,
I definitely saw it at the Dolby extra special sound, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Like I said, I mean, I love the soundtrack. And all of the songs, so I was trying very, very hard not to sing along, and it was one of those things that kind of it dredged back up a bunch of memories. There were little bits that I didn't remember that I remembered, and then when it happened, I was like, oh yeah, just so in that respect, I did greatly enjoy revisiting it. I can appreciate even in a, like you were saying, Becky, kind of the tacos versus taquitos thing. I can appreciate some of the changes that you'll make to a different production. And I know that The Little Mermaid's been done on Broadway, which I have not yet had the pleasure to see. So the idea of doing it in a different medium isn't wholly ridiculous. But then to Maddy's point, kind of that idea of like, what was changed enough to make it seem like it was worth dumping this much money into it or something, because I do feel like the original held up. At the same time, then I get the like, you know what, I'd want to play that character. I'd want to be able to sing that role. And so there's that idea as well. Just letting a newer generation have a crack at something that people love isn't necessarily a terrible idea either. So
yeah. And again, there were things that like I did actually enjoy more in this, and I think like you said, Kat, earlier, it seemed really long to me, but only the first half, the under the sea part. But like once everything was on land and her relationship with Eric, like we got to explore that more, and I actually really did enjoy it. That was one of my favorite new things that they did. Everything else I was kind of like was unnecessary to me, but like I felt like that actually helped establish their relationship a little bit more, got to see them actually developing feelings for each other instead of basically just seeing each other and like love at first sight. But they actually kind of like formed a bit of a friendship, which I enjoyed that. So I think that was a good thing. But like you said, like I just want there to be more of that kind of thing. Like I wanted there to be more and it was kind of a throwaway line, but like the whole her mother was killed by humans, like he said that, King Triton said that, but then they never explore like what happened. I'm like, oh, that would have been really interesting, because that would have given a really good reason for his hatred of the humans instead of just being like, I just don't like humans. But I thought that was interesting, and I'm like, oh, I want more of that, because I do, most Disney remakes I haven't liked because, again, like you said, Becky, like some people just like to see the same thing, and sometimes it is cool just to see it in a different medium, you know, just to see it, have real actors playing it or whatever. But most of the time I just want there to be something more, which I think that's why like Maleficent and maybe Cinderella actually are some of my favorite Disney remakes, because I think they really did bring something really different. And so yeah, but just something to think about.
I feel like also though with those, it's like I felt like they didn't have a lot in the character and story and everything with those, because like they were so pretty, and like I feel like there was more on the animation side of it, so there was a lot more to be added on those. But like there was a lot of room for them to add things.
Yeah, kind of like
both of
Cruella,
those were really good.
Where they sort of went back and did stuff that they hadn't done again. So it was almost like addendums to certain parts of the story that can make it a little interesting. And so I agree that even though there's the old lady part of me that's like, okay, this is still only taking place over 72 hours. Why are we talking about marriage
and kissing
72 hours? Like,
I really thought they were going to change that part.
Yeah.
But yes, they did actually explore a little bit more of their why they kind of liked each other, and they gave Eric a little bit more of that a similar mindset to Ariel in that way that could potentially be seen as reasons they would gel better together.
There were so many parallels between the two of them, and does this go I like how he fully was like, oh, that's not her. So that way, like, there was the full cutoff, you know, of like, so it's not like this, like one of you were saying earlier about like, it's establishing a fully separate reason for them to be attracted to each other. And it wasn't based on other things, because those, like, that door was kind of like already shut. And so then he's, you know, just like, so that way he's like over there like, oh no, I like these two different girls.
Yeah.
I love that they added that more to him. Like they gave him a more of a depth, instead of just being like, oh, look at just like he's just this like hot guy or whatever. Like for
yeah, I get that.
I can see that. Yeah. So we're probably getting close to, like, if we want to talk into any more of those things deeper, to actually get into spoiler territory a little bit, just little things here and there for those who haven't seen the changes or want to experience those changes on their own. So we probably want to move into a little bit deeper, but before we do that, I guess we'll move on to any ads that we might have. So here's that scuttlebutt.
Oh no, where's the button?
So what now?
Let's go!
Can you believe the scuttlebutt?
Get dressed, child.
You're welcome for the scuttlebutt.
We got a lot of work to do before sundown.
Scuttlebutt. Hey!
Oh, please let this be the day.
Let's go!
Thank you for listening to this episode of Popcorn Theology. If you want to hear more from us, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast catcher.
Also, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and share this episode with your friends.
Assuming you have friends. To sponsor more content like this, consider supporting Popcorn Theology through Patreon. Then you'll make some friends.
For just $1 a month, you can have friends. You can become a patron saint and be added to our exclusive Facebook group, where you can interact, influence, and vote on future episodes of the podcast.
Well, let's get back to the episode.
Well, we are back, getting ready to dig into the Little Mermaid a little bit deeper, find out what's in the fathoms below.
Quite a lot.
So, I'm kind of struck, honestly, as much as I like the Little Mermaid, specifically this version of it. For those who don't know, it is actually based on a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale that is a much darker, cautionary tale. So it's kind of interesting, actually, if you're interested, to go check that out and sort of see what the differences are in some of the themes. But I think some of the themes that came through in both are, for me anyway, and the reasons that I would actually say that some should watch this movie with a tiny bit of caution, are the ideas of desire, and when your desires lead you into disobedience and then even a dereliction of your duty. And so it feels to me like both Ariel and Eric, so they gave Eric a little more backstory and a little more personality perhaps in this version. But both he and Ariel seem to be kind of pulling the grass is greener on the other side sort of attitude that, while, again, not inherently terrible to begin with, to look at something else, to potentially desire something, the way that they both go about it feels then like they're actually, like I said, just being derelict in their duty. Ariel in this one is actually one of the 7 sisters of Triton who has apparently, at least from what I could figure out, some kind of duty as being part of the 7 seas. She's supposed to be either taking care of or acknowledging or stewarding one portion of Triton's kingdom, and he calls together a meeting for that, and she doesn't come because she's off daydreaming and kind of blowing off that responsibility. She's longing for something she doesn't seem to truly understand, and ultimately isn't actually better because Eric's experiencing the same frustration on the other side. And then for Eric, they gave him kind of this adoption story that he's adopted into this kingdom, but he doesn't want that responsibility and that duty. And he's kind of running away from that role then that he was actually graciously brought into. And it kind of made me think, I often think of Black Panther. So I'm going to pull a Miles and I'm going to try and get Black Panther into every episode.
Do it.
Where what I love about that character is he is always a king first. He's king of Wakanda, and his responsibility is to his people, and he's an Avenger second. Mm-hmm. And there was a huge moment in the comics when he revealed that, and the Avengers were like floored and felt betrayed or whatever, and he was like, I'm the king of my country. My duty is to my people first. So I feel like Ariel and Eric are both kind of floundering, as you will, in that. And so my concern then with a movie like this is that it's beautiful, visually stunning, catchy songs. It's full of talented performers. But it preaches, follow your heart, follow your desire. It kind of felt like it was pulling a little bit at the parents are old and stuffy and out of touch and quite possibly bigoted, and youth and new ideas are better, and we need to look at the world through a totally different lens. And there was a disregard of the history and the legacy that had come before them. And my concern with something like that is that this is a really satisfying tale for young minds, but it's disconnected from normative reality, even outside of a church setting. So an adult can look at a movie like this and kind of sift through some of those themes fairly deftly, fairly quickly, but without guidance, how many young women and men are going to take this kind of story as a reinforcement for their own narrative, when the reality probably is a lot of the things that they're chasing after and longing after are actually dysfunctional, potentially sinful, potentially dangerous, or they don't understand the nuances of the danger that might be there to be able to navigate those things appropriately. And so just because it's, again, I don't want people to denigrate it because, oh, it's a kid's movie. It's Little Mermaid. It's a Disney movie. You know, I can go let my kids see it. And I'm like, oh, no, please don't let your child watch this movie without some of these things in mind. And because parents can have and should have good parenting, should exercise a discipline of their child in the sense of disciplining them, discipling them in the way that they should go with proper caution, with proper care. And even in regards to Eric, I'm trying to explain that, he's born into a role, and we as Christians, I think we can understand that we're not born with a blank slate. We're born to something. We're called to something, and we bear certain responsibilities. And then as we're adopted as Christians, then we actually understand we're ambassadors for God's kingdom. And I think sometimes trying to get out of that responsibility can be kind of a dangerous mindset. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Again, like,
I could go on and on, but
yeah. And again, I think that was all, in the original version as well. And again, it's not like we're saying don't go see this movie or whatever, but like you said, it's like, it's just good to know and see, again, recognize what you're watching, what you're consuming, which is what like James' book is all about. Just know what you're consuming and know how it's going to affect you. And yeah, like, everybody loves Little Mermaid. I love it too. But that doesn't mean I don't see the things that might potentially, like you said, enter a child's mind in the way they present it. But like, I think they also show a little bit, I think actually in both of them, both in the old and this version, that she does repent a bit of that. It's not like a huge big thing, but it is acknowledged, like, oh yeah, this might not be a good idea. So at least there's that, and we can point that out too. Be like, look, I mean, we gotta, apologize for the things that we do, because this was a bad idea. But yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really struck me with this particular story that plays out in a lovely way to say this is a really bad idea is that kind of idea. Like, she has a desire to know more about the surface world. She sees someone that she thinks is potentially honorable because of the way that he behaves, and so she's intrigued by him. She's fascinated by him. She wants to know more about him. None of that is inherently wrong or sinful. No, yeah. But then the way that she goes about it when her father says no, and we can talk about King Triton and some of his parenting skills a little bit later, because I do think the movie speaks to that as well. But it asks that question: what lengths will you go to fulfill your desire? And I was really, really struck this time by some of the lyrics in one of the songs when she says, "Betcha on land they understand, but they don't reprimand their daughters." And I went, what? Like, just like, what? that disregard or utter despisal of any sort of discipline is a huge thing that our society is currently fighting against. And then she asks the question later on too. She says, "What would I pay to walk a day in the sand?" And then you see what she would pay. She turns basically to the occult in a sense. Like, she turns to this sort of demonic figure of Ursula to get what she wants. She's willing to basically sign away her soul to get this desire that she has. And then even within that, she gets played, like, she gets manipulated so strongly by Ursula, but then it costs not just her soul, but it ends up costing her father's life. And that idea that like our sins and our desires and stuff are not in a vacuum. And so I would say for people that are kind of dealing with some of that kind of stuff, some of the scriptures that can be brought to bear would be Hebrews 12:11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So again, that despisal of any form of discipline or any sort of censure, the Lord disciplines those he loves for our good. And then there's also Matthew 19:19, where Jesus himself reiterates that you should honor your father and mother. Although there is also a caveat with that with Colossians 3:21, where it says, fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. So again, there's a little bit of discussion that can be had there, but her general attitude of just being so dismissive of her father's concerns, so dismissive of his rules, leads her down such a dark and tragic path that almost costs more. It almost costs her the man she's interested in. It potentially costs her soul. It potentially costs her father's life. It could have wreaked havoc on both kingdoms because Ursula gained power. Like, it's just...
Yeah. I do like they did have it at both when she was about to sign, right? Like, she was like, oh, wait, this is wrong. No. And then also, like, later, I think when something first went wrong, like, maybe when Eric's like, oh, that's not her. It was something where she was just like, what did I do? Like, what did I pay? Like, I did, like, there's a couple times where she realized what she did. But I feel like that's also even more so with the parenting thing, because she's just a young, like, sure, she's not like a little kid, but she's young, right? Like, way into, I mean, probably like our whole lives, but just definitely at least into our mid-20s. Like, we're still like so, like, our brains are still developing through like 25 or so, and like we're still like so easily swayed by anything around us. And so she doesn't have the guidance. She didn't feel heard. So you can kind of see, like, she didn't like have that, like, a full guidance of how to process everything, and that she was able to be manipulated so easily. And I feel like yes, she probably has things that we could blame her about that, but I feel like also we can't always like blame someone who's been, well, it's a both and, right? Like, people who are getting manipulated are also victims, and it's like, I don't know. It's hard because I feel like sometimes people might be in a situation where they're getting an authority that's not being helpful, or, they're not teaching them stuff. And so I felt like she was also like just very lost without the right tools to be able to discern the things around her or understand the rules and why she's being told not to go. I mean, she knew generally that her mom or whatever, but she didn't fully get it. She's like, but that was one guy.
You're muted. Maddy, you're muted.
There we go.
I was like, oh my goodness, what?
Yeah, I didn't know who you were talking to. Yeah, I was like, what? No. I think you hit it though, Becky. Is you said that she didn't have the right tools, and that's why it's important to have the church and the fellowship of the saints to help steer you in good directions, because ultimately you do take responsibility for your own sin, obviously. But yeah, like, there are definitely victims out there. But like you said, both and, you need that fellowship of people who are going to lead you in the right direction. And I think this film shows that at first her friends are going down the same path she is, like Sebastian and Flounder are like, don't tell Triton what happened. We can't tell him. And that's a bad thing. Like, if he had known from the beginning, none of this would have happened, but then no movie, right? So you have to have conflict. But that's the thing, like, you've lesson learned, basically.
Yeah.
Like, also he's trying to protect himself.
Well, yeah, they were definitely trying to protect themselves, and I think that's a huge piece, and part of what, Becky, you talked about too, like the parenting idea, that communication between Triton and Ariel needs some work, obviously, but trying to hide your sin is not the way to do it, right? Being open and honest about where you're at, what you're feeling, what you're struggling with is the only possible way that her father would have even had that chance to fully understand and maybe guide her better, because I would agree, like him coming in and just blowing up all of her stuff is probably not the greatest parenting move he could have made.
He at least was
Yeah,
sad
my dad
about
never
that.
blew up my stuff, so
He was sad, and he recognized his error, and then he was unable to find her to apologize at that moment, which could have also potentially stopped some of the stuff that was going on. But I remember from my own personal experiences of being in similar situations and having a father that I thought was a little bit stern. But I remember there was a time when they told me, like, I wanted to go to Europe with my choir. And it was an expensive trip. It was going to cost a lot of money for us to be able to go. And one of my parents probably would have had to go along as a chaperone sort of thing. And they told me that I needed to get certain grade level. I had to maintain a B level grade level. This was like in high school. And I didn't just not maintain a B. And I was absolutely capable of maintaining B's in my classes. And I didn't just not do that. I flunked social studies. Flunked it. Like, just didn't turn in homework at whatsoever, right? And I remember, and my parents sat me down and basically told me, you're not going on the choir trip. And they had a bunch of their peers that were kind of like, oh, you're robbing her of this experience. And my parents were like, no, she robbed herself of the experience. We didn't ask anything unreasonable of her. We explained the parameters, and we're holding to that disciplinary action of taking this away from her. And that actually taught me quite a bit about my own character, their character, of holding to those things. But again, that was with a lot of discussion, and they explained very clearly why I was no longer going on this trip. But these sorts of movies make me think about those types of things. And again, then that my actions aren't in a vacuum. My actions of not holding up my end of the bargain also then affected the people on my choir, because then I wasn't there to sing with them. And yet the protagonists in films like this are often presented like, you don't see the ripple effect of what your sin does. The idea, like scripture says, where a little bit of yeast leavens the whole bread. And so I find these movies need to be just watched carefully. I get concerned if parents are just like, oh, just go watch it. It's Little Mermaid. It's pretty and it'll be fine. And I think that we just have to be very cautious with that. And so that theme of kind of your desire, even a desire that's potentially good, not inherently bad, can be absolutely twisted and turned against you, or can become so large in your mind that it's the only thing you can see, and it sort of eclipses your reason. It eclipses your ability to withstand temptations to then get it in ways that might not be honorable. And I think that can be a real danger. And something like this can present that as a potentially good thing. And then even when because it all turns out good in the end, right? Mm-hmm. So everything's okay. And I'm like, no, that's not how no.
Yeah.
Just
and
because.
Yeah. It's like part of you, it's like, obviously we want a happy ending because it's a Disney fairy tale, and they're going to give us that because it's a Disney fairy tale. But like what you're saying, contrast that with the original fairy tale, which actually was a cautionary tale, where, spoilers, she dies in the end. She does not get the prince. Yeah, very depressing. But like that was the point of fairy tales, was to actually teach kids lessons.
Yep.
And so like I feel like, you know, with these newer versions of The Little Mermaid, like she kind of, you know, she learns her lesson basically, but not in such a terrible way that kids might not remember as much. So like you said, Kat, it's just like watch it and be like, ask your kids, like, what do you think of what Ariel did there? Like, was that a good thing or was that a bad thing? What did she learn from this? Those are good questions to ask of any movie, of any character. And that's what basically this is all about, you know, just...
Well, and even as a parent, right? Like, okay, if you were feeling those strong emotions, how could you talk to me? How, talk to me about that. I remember we have some friends now we have quite a few friends actually that have teenage daughters, and so no one's going this crazy, but there are some of these large emotions as they're learning to navigate those things, and the parents trying to understand and figure it out. And I remember a question that one of my friends asked her daughter was basically like, do you trust me? As she's having that conversation, do you know that I want your good? So can you trust me? And in that question of submission to authority, can you submit to my authority because of what you know of my character? And I think in this movie, we don't get enough of that relationship between her and King Triton. Mm-hmm. And that's something I would like to have seen. Like, on one level, yes, he's the king, he's her authority figure. And there's a point when at some point, you have to lay down the law and just say, you got to do it. Yeah. You got to do it. But I would have appreciated a little more communication, honest communication between her and her father about then the sort of temptations that she was feeling and those desires to go other and to go places that she was being told she shouldn't go because there was danger there.
Yeah, it's like he was telling her, don't go see the humans. I don't like humans. Humans are bad, without explaining why. And, like, that just makes me think of, like, why I think this podcast, like, when I found this podcast, why it was so important to me, because there are a lot of people who didn't understand, like, why would you watch that movie? There can't be anything good in it, or I don't understand what you see in this. And instead of just saying, you can't watch that movie because I think it's bad, you have to tell them why. And I think my parents did a good job of that. Like, they never, or if they did, like if I was little and they would say, you can't watch this movie, they never just said, you can't watch it, and that's it. They would say, hey, you can't watch this, you're not old enough yet, you can't handle this content just yet, but wait a couple years and we'll watch it together, and I think you'll really enjoy it.
Did you have a specific theme that you kind of latched onto, Maddy, that struck you more than...
Yeah, so actually, stemming straight from yours, Kat, from desire, where does desire lead us? It leads us into temptation, which, again, I felt like was a pretty big theme in this movie, and we kind of touched on it already because of desire, but because of her desires, Ariel is tempted into this sin, basically, by something she loves, and... we all know the devil works that way. He presents it as a lovely, shiny gift, which actually is not a gift at all. It's a bad thing. But, like in the garden, it's like, did God really say? Why would he put such strict rules on you? And, it kind of gives us this option between legalism and antinomianism, both of which are bad. And it's funny because I was just reading Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, and I forget which chapter it was in, it's near the end, but he was saying how the devil often tempts us with two wrong choices. And that's so true. I feel like all the time, it's like, it's this or this. And Ursula preys on Ariel in that way. She gives her a choice of, it's like, okay, disobey your father and get everything you wanted, become human, or just go back to living under his thumb and he's just going to oppress you. And she's manipulating her because her father isn't really that manipulative. He loves her. He may not know how to show it as well, like you said earlier. Maybe his parenting skills need a little work, but he is working out of a desire to protect her. But Ursula's making her think that, no, he's manipulating you, and I'm the one who's going to help you. And that tempts her into a bad choice. And I kind of liked how in this version, Ariel does question whether or not she's doing the right thing. It also kind of makes it a little worse because she questions whether it's right and then she does it anyway. So again, just a thing to talk about, but she literally does. She goes, I don't know, I think this is the wrong choice. But then Ursula drags her back in. It's like, no, you should do this. And I don't know, it just comes back to haunt her. Again, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier as well. Like, right away, sin is deceitful. Ursula says, oh, I'm going to make you human. Caveat, he has to kiss you in order to stay human. Caveat, you're going to forget that you need to kiss him. So you're not really going to get what you want. This is ultimately going to end in disaster. And it all works in favor of her, not Ariel. Mm-hmm. So, because it's bewitching. And again, like, sin seems nice on the outside, but once you open up that Pandora's box, a lot of things happen.
Yeah, I remember a scripture that says that, like, secret bread tastes good, but he does not know that death is there.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I often think about that in lines of this. Like, you think, oh, I'm going to get what I want, and it's going to make me happy or fulfilled or fill this hole, and actually it brings death.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was thinking of... in James 1:14 it says, "But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." Which, again, ties into basically what you just said. And in this version, like we said earlier, Triton does admit a little more fault. We talked about his parenting skills, but we again, like, you can see this in a, like, Triton is God kind of way, but Triton is not like God. He obviously makes mistakes. And that's, like, one thing we have to reject is that, kind of in this version, he tells her that you shouldn't have had to lose your voice in order for me to hear you, but we know that God always hears us, and he does know what's best for us.
Yeah, that's part of I have a hard time as much seeing the disobedience things. I'm thinking, but he's not being setting a good thing to follow, where that would be a difference there. But yeah, with that James thing though that you mentioned, that made me think also about Ursula kind of preying on Ariel, and she's watching her and she's thinking, okay, what do I got to do now? And she's just using her and planning, and not just oh, hey, she's upset, let me go mess with her. It's just she's
yeah,
as if it's maybe there were also other, it made me think there might have been other things along the way that led to this point, to make her earlier in her life, and stuff that little seeds here and there. And it made me think about another C.S. Lewis book, the Screw Tape Letters, right? They keep talking about oh yeah, do this and then do this and then do this, this little thing. Because yeah, she's just watching her, okay, so where are we gonna appeal to her desires and her weaknesses?
Well, I think Scripture too says the enemy prowls around like a lion, seeking those to devour. And I think you're right, Becky. Ursula's absolutely doing that. She's looking for those weaknesses. She's looking for that thing that she can press on to say, oh, but don't you want this? I mean, she's basically doing the your dad's so mean. Oh, and he did it to me too. That way of kind of making this camaraderie.
We're the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're the same. And, but I have the ability I can help you. And my help is giving you what you want.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, Triton had the ability to give his daughter what she wanted all along. And there could have been a better way to go about it, both in their communication with each other as well. And again, I think that's why I always joke about what I call the CW conversation, which if you watch a bunch of CW shows, it always feels like people are having half conversations where everything's just sort of, they either have half sentences or everything's just implied, and then they sort of expect the other person to fully understand their idea or what they're doing or where they're at. And then everything goes haywire like a massive soap opera. And it's kind of... this feels a bit like that, right? Where the dad has has righteous, or maybe not righteous, but like he has right concerns for his daughter, but by just laying down the law, he's actually making her more inclined to flout it in this way, because he's not fully explaining to her or trying to understand what her actual needs and desires and maybe even giftings are, or where they lay. And so that is a failing in him that would not be in our Heavenly Father, as you were saying, Maddy. But I think too, I think you're right, Becky. Like Ursula is so devious in how she goes about setting that trap. And it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting with that extra hour of footage if they had actually shown that she kind of did, like, if this was sort of her MO, right? She's done it before. And I think in the original, they actually showed there were a whole bunch of little mer people that she's turned into little seaweed creatures. And I didn't see that here.
I think those were the eyeball weird things, like the star eyeballs.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they changed the design of it.
Yeah, and they showed a couple of skulls, which was a little darker, to be honest.
Also true. Yeah, okay.
I feel like there were different ways, because, like, when King Triton, he just kind of dissipated. Like, there were, I feel like there's different effects of the stuff. So I think the eyeball starfish were things, because I don't know, I haven't seen sea creatures like that before. So I think that's what they were. Because also they were grabbing her and stuff. Yeah. So, and I feel like, what is she? No, she called it her garden. But yeah. And for a second, I thought that the eels, I thought they changed it so that the eels were it, because she's like, this one wanted to get thinner and this one wanted to get thinner. I was just like, what? What? But then later she said, my boys. And so before she said, this one wants to get the girl. So so I'm like, okay, so maybe she was just using them as placements. But I thought like maybe it was like a Nagini situation.
Oh, wow.
These are the people. Maybe. Like, see, look how thin you are as an eel.
Yeah. That's funny.
Well, but yeah, but I think you're right that like her song implies it, and I think it was maybe more explicit in the original version that those little creatures, and I think if I remember correctly, they grab at her like trying to get her to stop, but they can't really speak or express themselves in the original, and so
you're right. They didn't really say that they were mer people in this one, in the new one. It was just they were just kind of there.
But she mentions in her song, the lyrics of her song are kind of like, this one wants to get the girl, and I help them. Yes, I do. Like, that, she's playing up her own...
her power.
Power, but also then, like, her own accomplishment, her own... I'm trying to think of the... grandiose isn't the right word. There's her sense of, like... I'm here to help you. I'm just here to help you.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely how Satan operates. And so she's a fascinating villain in that sense, right? Yeah. She plays the victim. She then sidles up to you and makes you play the victim. Oh, you should get what you want. You should be happy. And I think it made me think of a couple things, like the Psalm 119, where it says, the Lord's statutes are my delight. They are my counselors. Because I feel like Ariel, in her, she seeks out the wrong counsel, right? And then there's also the 1 Corinthians that says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. So even when she has that moment of like, oh, I think this might be a bad idea. And then Ursula's like, no. Let me tell you, this is a great idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It also made me think of, while you were talking, Kat, about, Ursula paying up her grandiosity in a sense. But when Jesus is tempted in the desert and the devil offers him the world, it's like, bow down to me and I will give you everything. When he really had no power to give it. Kind of same with Ursula. Like, she doesn't actually have the power. Triton had the power to make her human. But Ursula's like, but I can give it to you. I can give you everything you want.
Yeah, there's always a catch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's so much more you could talk about.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Some of that ideas of the temptation, standing firm against that temptation, trying to even see it. Like, half the time we don't even see it as a temptation.
Yeah.
and yet it's so easy to fall into those snares. I think our hearts naturally lead us there. We want to avoid the authority and responsibility that is sometimes placed upon us. And so it can be really, really easy to turn to that other counselor that goes, no, you don't have to do that. You can get what you want. I don't know. So there's a lot to talk about there, but we should probably move on a little bit. Becky, what were some of the thoughts you had? I know you love Little Mermaid, and you had a lot of different thoughts. Where did you kind of land with some of the things that really struck you about this particular one?
Yeah, I coming at it a little like different, but yeah, I was trying to figure out like where, and so like rather than like more theological and intangible things like desire and temptation, I'm like, I need one thing, I don't know, but I kept making me think about like more instead about like churches and denominations and doctrine, tradition, etc. Because both Ariel and Eric made me think about people who are like in a church, or maybe like just kids in a religious family or something, or they're just told what to do, but then they don't have the direct truth, like the whole like going to the other world, depending on how you say like world, that could be different, but anyway, like I feel like they don't have the direct truth, like they're getting this like hearsay. They're like, well, this is like how it is, but they want to both go out and see for themselves. And Ariel is, I feel like there's some, I was just right now I just had a thought, I'm like, I feel like there's something there with like Luther's like Here I Stand. I'm trying to think about Ariel and standing, and I don't know. Well, anyway, yeah, like with that, it's funny that like I know a lot of times I've like you guys were saying about like Ariel's disobedience and this and that, and that makes sense, coming from like if someone is like talking about like kids watching it, and so especially if like parents with kids, or like people who had good parents and stuff like that. But like to me, I kept seeing like Triton is like more like a Pharisee, like being the like this is how it is and that's just how it's got to be. And both Triton and the Queen seemed kind of like xenophobic. They're just like, oh yeah, those people are evil. And it's kind of like they were influenced by bad experiences. Although I don't remember if they said what the Queen's reasoning was.
They didn't. That's something I was confused about. I think it would have been better if they did, because, again, they fleshed out a little bit more why Triton was because of the mom or whatever, which, again, that could have been fleshed out more too as well. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I would have liked to have seen a reason for the Queen, because she said something like, the gods are against us, the sea gods are against us, they've always been against us, but like no real reason why.
And they're taking back our island, but they didn't really flesh that piece out.
Like she said it, but she didn't fully get to why. It's funny, every time there's something like that, like then like we talk about like with my husband, like he'd be like, well, that's something for the sequel. Yeah. Every time there's like a gap or something, it's just like, that's for the sequel.
Yeah, whenever there's a line like that, I'm like, I want to know more. Like, why didn't you flesh that out? I want to know that.
Yeah, because it was really interesting. Like,
well, I would say like it felt like there were two pieces to that again, I would argue, I would agree with you guys, they don't flesh out fully, because there's the kind of crazy mythology that the sailors exhibit, right? The sirens are going to bewitch you and drag you down to your death. We don't know if that's actually true, except it's fairly obvious that the siren song does bewitch. And even Eric's I Want song, I was a little bit disturbed by, because I was like, okay, but his I Want song wasn't even about I don't want to be king, I don't want this responsibility, or I feel like my life is the sea and I want to explore and I want to understand the world. It wasn't that. Like, his I Want song was literally just like, I want this girl. Yeah. Please find me, come find me, I want this girl. And there was part of me that was like, oh, they probably didn't mean it this way, but he comes across as bewitched. Yeah. Even at that point, just by Ariel. And so there was that piece, which again, I wish they had fleshed out. I'm kind of headcanoning this as we speak, but that idea of the Queen then being concerned about maybe the sea creature,
Oh, yeah.
these sea creatures will bewitch my son. They will take him away. There was the idea of the shipwrecks. If the gods are angry, they're going to wreck our ships and I'll lose you in that sense. And so I think that fear was there, but it wasn't well defined. And so then it comes across as a little flat and weird. And then, like you were saying, Becky, it just comes across as straight up xenophobic,
which I guess is like another thing where it makes sense with real life, just with like, you know, like Ursa's manipulation. You see that both from like the devil or from other people. Like with this, like it's like we don't know what happened to the king. We don't know, like, why she say it's taking it back? Like, was there something where the island was like uninhabited and they went and took over it? Like, you know, there's so much more that would be there, but we don't know. And it's also like, how far back was it? Like, what does she know also? Because what if it was like generations before? So she actually doesn't know a lot more. I mean, obviously she would know whatever happened to her husband, assuming she had one. I mean, maybe she even
they didn't seem to explain that either, unless I missed the line.
I mean, it's also possible that she didn't, because I mean there weren't other kids, or I don't remember if they mentioned. Oh no, yeah, because he only said my father, so I think that sounded like his adopted father. But at any rate, it does make, that's another thing that makes me think about how it's like, it's kind of just like, it's just like these things passed down. And the siren thing is actually, well, a couple of things on that. Like, it was interesting because the sailors thing saying like, oh yeah, this is the coral moon when like the sirens come together to lure us to the rocks. And then it switches to say like, yes, the coral moon. So the Sea King did call all his daughters together, but it wasn't to lure sailors to the rocks. It was to like have a like council meeting of the seven seas or whatever it is that they were doing. And that kind of made me think about that is like other things in real life, whether it's between believers and non-believers, Jew and Gentiles, denominations, countries, like whatever, there might be things where you, like, they had a partial truth, right? Like they had it wrong, and then they had the thing, the ending of it was wrong, where it's like, but they had part of it, and so it's kind of like a thing where it's like just it's twisted, and so they don't have the full truth there. Like the sailors were wrong, but they were half right.
Right.
But the siren thing was an interesting, I felt like, an addition, because it was just like, oh, she's got a pretty singing voice because here she is at the concert. Whereas this one, it's like, oh, this is your siren song. Like, this is actually like a tool that can be used for evil. And and I wonder if there's a way to be used it for good. I feel like it could be, but they didn't. Another thing they could have gone into was like guiding the sailors, just the way that she was helping, right? Like how she saved Max, and I feel like there's another point, you know, where like they can actually save people, but
well, it seemed like they said something about her using the siren song to save Eric, like maybe it called him back from the brink of death or something, but they didn't.
I think they did mention that, but it was kind of a passing line, and you're just like, wait, more. This
is the CW conversation thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, there was so much like lore within that was very interesting, because like sirens is always this like, you know, like it's evil, we're gonna come and eat you. So it's interesting if they're kind of expanding on that a bit, of being like, well, they're not always evil. Like maybe it could be this and that, and like the evilness is what the sailors were saying, but they didn't really go into that. But I thought it was interesting because it's just like, and that's why they introduced that, but then they did shut it with like kind of, because he's pining for her, and that's why I like that he was like, oh, that's not her, and then they connected otherwise, since like, okay, it's not from her siren song, since you did introduce this whole thing of like
yes, no, Vanessa, I agree with that.
Which I think they only called her Vanessa in the credits, and they actually say her name out loud, but
like,
I
think you're right.
Actually, like actually bewitching him, and it's just like, did Ariel bewitch him? Like maybe because.
Yeah, maybe a little, but it wasn't fully formed. You know, it's funny. I actually just thought you were talking about when you have a half truth and how it can color how you behave around a certain group of people. The idea of like Christians being misunderstood in the early centuries, where they would talk about you have to eat the blood and or drink the blood and eat my flesh to be saved, and everybody's like, oh, Christians are cannibals. And I was actually kind of hoping, one thing I thought might have been cool is since they had brought in those ideas, the Triton being very anti the surface world, and the surface world being very fearful and anti the mer people, when they started coming together at the end, like they even brought up the idea that like maybe your marriage will start a new era of understanding. I actually would have loved to have seen a meeting of the monarchs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And them beginning to actually talk to each other, communicate with each other, learn about each other in a way that they could then understand each other. I would have loved to have seen that as a piece of then that their marriage would actually have been this beautiful example of the reconciliation between two divided worlds. And I would have loved to have seen that because there's so many little themes that are being pulled at. The theme of him being adopted was so beautiful. The idea that they fleshed out his backstory, that he was on a shipwreck and the king and queen adopted him and then conferred upon him princehood and some of that responsibility that we were talking about earlier. But then the idea that kind of in a Romeo and Juliet way, right?
Yeah.
That two people from different worlds can see past some of those differences or some of those half-truths to actively engage with each other, learn about each other, and come to know and reconcile each other. And then through that could potentially reconcile these two disparate worlds. I would have loved if they'd pulled on that thread a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like there was that, and like with some of the things that they added to flesh it out a bit, I feel like part of like why they pulled back and didn't explore these various things that they were introducing is because they wanted to keep that same kind of like cadence of, you know, because I feel like
it's like they were too scared to delve deeper into some of these themes because I think they were worried about keeping it, like you said, like we still want it to be Little Mermaid. Yeah. And so we're going to sprinkle stuff, but we're not going to delve.
Yeah, like they wanted to be the same story, whereas like some of the things, like whether it's Maleficent and Cruella as like kind of prequel kind of deals, or Aladdin, I feel like kind of went a slightly different way. I think they wanted to keep it a lot of exactly the same, and that's why they didn't go into it. And it's just like, yeah, I would like that. Because Meeting of the Monarchs would have been great. Also, I want to be like, okay, so what's like the later plan with like the Korra Moon? Like, is Eric gonna get a tail? Because I feel like he would love the Under the Sea. Why are we not discussing this? Yeah. At least it doesn't seem like it's gonna turn into like, oh, the mess that was Little Mermaid 2. But like,
I never watched that.
I think I did, but it was so
basically long. Little Mermaid reverse, where like Ariel, like Ursula's sister, like cursed her daughter Melody, and she was basically like, "You're not going to go to the sea," and she's like kept being drawn to the sea. I'm like, yeah, because she's a mermaid. Like, why have you not learned your own lesson?
Yeah, but, exactly.
But I love the songs and side characters in that one. Yeah. But anyway, I digress. But
I really feel like this new version of The Little Mermaid, because of all the sprinkling of different ideas, it could have really have done with like a Lord of the Rings style prologue where you're just like, okay, here's the history between the mermaids and the humans.
Yeah.
And then just start the movie, because then you have the backstory of like, this is why they hate each other, you know, instead of like you said, Becky, like, no, they're just xenophobic, but it's like, let's explain some of the history here. And then, you know, at the end, that makes so much more sense with them coming together. And again, I just felt like it needed so much more explanation and just, again, like potential. There was so much potential, and I feel like they just kind of missed the mark by that much.
Yeah, it would have been really good at the opening without really even like interrupting the movie. Yeah. Because like, if they did it as like a credits kind of thing, like, because I feel like they tried a little bit with that opening scene.
Yeah, like with that Hans Christian Andersen quote, but like more.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. And with the Hans Christian Andersen thing, that was funny because, because in the original, she turns into like sea foam. And it was kind of like really depressing, and so I was like, weird that they had that quote there, and I'm like, you guys are not going to tell us the context of this quote, are you? Because like, it's too dark for this. But it was actually funny. It made me think of a point where Eric's putting the dress into the sea, which I meant to do this on the we got into the thing, but
oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, no.
you just went. I'm like, oh wait, but when Eric was putting the dress into the sea, and then the queen's like, yeah, our worlds weren't meant to be together, and it was going. I'm just like. Is this gonna end? And like it switched scenes, and my husband's like, and it was a switch scenes. My husband like whispered like the end, and I'm like, shut up, because this is exactly what I'm thinking. I'm like halfway between like getting ready to like get up and scream, but the other half of me was just like, I kind of actually hope that it ends here, because that's actually a really great ending. It was just like, there goes the dress, and like, I'm sorry, like it would be a terrible, depressing, but like kind of like good, bittersweet. It's like,
for the people who like depressing endings, me included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that side of me,
Yeah.
the depressing like side of me wanted it to end there. But it was also weird because as it went to the next scene, it looked like it could have been the backgrounds of a credits, because it was just like under the sea, and I was just like, and then finally like someone spoke, and I'm like, okay, we're good.
That would have been the bold creative twist that no one really asked for.
Everyone would have been so upset, but it would have been like so
would have been hilarious.
like it would have been like a really tragic story.
That could have been in the that would have fallen then in the sort of the under the sun style of when James describes certain movies as sort of, redemptive under the sun, or otherwise you're like, this is the consequence of your sin. Smash credits, right?
Yeah.
But it did feel
How it should
like
have
a
ended.
homage, like to the original, since like
A little, yeah.
It felt like I was like, here's a fake ending for this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Fake out.
But back
Well, and
on to this, though, I forget where we were. So the other day, I felt like there was something else I was gonna say.
It's okay. We went on a tangent. It was good.
Yeah, I mean, and Becky, you were sort of hitting at that sort of broader application of some of the themes and things that can be found in this movie. And I find it really interesting that you actually were thinking more, almost more corporately, like when you brought up the idea that some of the denominations and people in the churches, and how do you discern truth, and when is it good for you to know these things for yourself, right, rather than just maybe riding on someone else's coattails. And I like that you brought up Luther, because obviously Luther encouraged Bible reading and was trying to kind of, like, the idea of the Reformation wasn't brand new. It was a reforming of actual biblical doctrines and an understanding of what those doctrines were, and not just having all this stuff layered on top of it. But then at the same time, you do need teachers and evangelists, and there's that part of scripture where it talks about the members each having their own giftings, and so there's people that can help edify or encourage and explain some of what you're seeing in scripture. Like when Philip met the eunuch, the eunuch needed him to help explain what he was reading, right? Is this about him? Is the guy talking about himself, or is he talking about someone else? And then Philip's able to open that up for him. And so it's kind of a neat way to think about some of that. And since you do have these two kingdoms that are in this tale, I like that, like you were digging into sort of the half-truths that they know about each other, and you need the truth. And that is some of what Ariel and Eric were seeking after, is that idea. Like, yes, we've had bad experiences. We've had experiences that have ended poorly, but is that the sum total of who these people are? And I think as Christians, defining other people simply as sinners or looking down on them because of their sin or that sort of thing is not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to try and show them the loveliness of Christ, to woo them to that idea and make them understand that some of these ideas we've been talking about, right? The discipline of the Lord is actually for your betterment, because he's not Triton. He's not a punitive Father who doesn't want you to be happy, but that he actually knows what is best for you. He knows your gifting. He knows what you need. He knows how to help you navigate the world that you're in, and how we seek our counsel, what friends we keep around us. I think I just lost my train of thought.
Derailed.
But what's fascinating to me about this is there are so many little threads and things that can be pulled at that Maddy and I are like, oh, I see these big theological E's on the eye chart, right? There's this idea of temptation. There's this idea of your desire. Is it righteous? The strength of my passion for my desire is not what makes it a righteous desire, but does it actually conform into something that is beneficial for me and or others around me? Who are my counselors? Who am I listening to? Who am I allowing to speak into and guide me? And then, am I walking in the light? Am I trying to be that open and honest about where I am so that I can be edified, helped, encouraged by those around me, including potentially my parents or those sorts of things. And I love that we can get all of that and a lot more, honestly, because as we just touched on a few of these lines, and I would love to sit and be like, oh, okay, what about this one? What about this? If you pull that out, what do you get? And that's absolutely fascinating to me. That those different perspectives can be brought to bear on the same movie experience. So are there any other themes you think that we didn't hit? We could do maybe a really quick kind of round robin in the like receive, reject, redeem idea, because there are so many little threads that were in this. Is there anything that we didn't really get to touch on that you're kind of like, I'd like to receive that one, reject that one, or just another theme that you're like, no, I want to talk about this for another hour?
Sorry, real quick. I just realized it's almost like the same thing over again, but I just thought of like a different image. Like, yeah, the queen saying like the gods are against us made me think of like, you know, like people have like one bad experience at church and now like a bad experience with a Christian, and then they hate Christianity and they hate God and stuff like that. And then like it was also interesting because the sisters coming together to meet King Triton made me think about like, you know, you have a convention or sessions of a presbytery or like something like that, like all coming together, and it could be like it's better all together. I don't know. I was just talking with someone the other day about how like you've got the like Reformed or Presbyterian, like various like things, but sometimes can be too cold. And then it's also the same things, but like non-denominational can be too unstructured and have no idea what they're doing. And so it's kind of like a whole, like everybody working together. So it's also why like the sea and the land needs to work together. Like, I don't know, just all the things of like white harmony and stuff. Yeah. It's better because you get multiple viewpoints. And which I guess is also like this, what you pointed out earlier, like with the multiple viewpoints, because it made me feel better because I feel like I always miss the E's and I feel like ridiculous for like when you say like, oh, here's the obvious one. Like there was like previous episodes too, like, oh, this is an obvious one. I'm like, well, I didn't even notice that.
Well, that's why it's nice to have this discussion with other people, because I always find that when I talk with friends about these things, somebody will always point out something that you never even thought about. And I love that because you did bring up points that I didn't think about at all. And that's a great thing. And there were things that Kat said that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Why didn't I think of that? And again, because God made us all different and he gave us different ways to see things, you know, as artistic people. I think we kind of love that, you know, it's like we all see things in a different way, and when you can bring out, you know, the different things that we see and make everyone else understand too, it's always great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it is sort of a strength in numbers and the different perspectives that are brought to bear, the different wisdom that can be brought to bear based on your experiences, which we've even talked about with this movie, right? Like Triton had some reason to be cautious, but then maybe he shouldn't have just shunned everything because of that fear or the way that he was parenting out of fear, or, you know, so him having some counsel as well can be, it can be helpful. And so as Christians, as we learn and we grow and repent and walk together, that is how iron sharpens iron, how we help each other see things that God is doing. That can be really, really beautiful. So I really wanted a meeting of the monarchs and seeing, like you were saying, Becky, land and sea working together. Like, how powerful would that be?
Yeah, that'd be like so great. But yeah, Duran Ramen. Sorry, I was.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
So at one point, Sebastian's like, "I serve you," and then he's like, "Well, like you gotta serve me by watching Ariel because he didn't want to go like be her babysitter, and it made me think about like the best. He's like, you know, the way to show, like, he's like, you know, like Jesus asking Peter, like, do you love me? Then well, then watch my sheep, or something like that. Like, and so it made me think about that, right? Like, it's just like, well, if you love me and serving me, then go watch my daughter because she's running off and crazy. Like,
Yeah, I feel like another big theme, like, that, you know, could be talked about, I feel like, for hours on end, is the theme of self-sacrifice, too.
Oh,
because that was, like...
touch on that.
I was, like, that was going to be my main point, but then I got into, like, I got into temptation. I was tempted by temptation. And I was like, well, that's a cool point, too. And I'm like, I can't do both. But, yeah, I mean, you could talk about how Triton, Ariel, and Eric all demonstrate self-sacrifice at some point. You know, Ariel saves Eric. Mm-hmm. Eric risks everything to go after Ariel. Triton literally dies for Ariel. There's your Christ analogy in this movie. Mm-hmm. You know, again, tons of things that we could talk about, and that one was definitely, I feel like, a big E that we totally didn't talk about, but we could.
Yeah, absolutely. So receiving some of that. Were there any others that I mean, we've kind of gone the gamut with a lot of this. I don't know if there are any others.
Yeah, I was trying to think of some of them. I have like half thoughts only. I was trying to think about like how Sebastian and I don't know, like I was talking with my husband, we're pointing out how like Sebastian and Grimsby, like were like Sebastian in this one was a lot more like soft shelled as right, and then like Grimsby, they added more. Like he was kind of just like this guy, like I don't know, he wasn't. They added more to him, and both of them were kind of like they're doing their best to try to like be there for the person that they're watching. Both with like Sebastian be like,
kind of like counselor characters.
But now I'm here for you, and Grimsby just like I don't know, kicking the ring and just being like,
oh yeah,
what you doing? Like I don't even know who this girl is. Like you want your what ring? Like
he must have insight that we don't know about.
Yeah, so I don't know. It just made me think about like I was trying to. It was a half thought though. I couldn't figure out. Like I feel like at one point we're trying to figure out like the Holy Spirit being there, but no, or maybe if it's more just like, you know, your fellow Christians like watching out for each other. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely
meeting somewhere where they are instead of just saying like you did this and this was bad. Like that's you're bad and bye. You know, but like. Okay, now let's see how we're going to get out of this. And
yeah, Sebastian certainly was trying to help rectify a bad situation, and then realizing that she was so, for lack of a better analogy, like she was so deluded into what she had, even though that wasn't her fault, that Ursula had actually tricked her even farther by making her forget the criteria of what she had to do. And so he was like, well, okay, I'm your friend. I'm going to help you get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that support that Flounder, Scuttle, and Sebastian did give her, even as I would have said they should have come clean earlier, but then they're trying to protect and help her get through this thing so that, you know, she would have the chance to reconcile with her father or something.
Which is,
later.
I guess, why I was like, well, maybe that doesn't work as much for like Holy Spirit guiding you as so much as like your fellow friends, because like they're gonna mess up too. Like Sebastian's like wants to help her, but he's also wants to watch his back and not get fired. And Scuttle is just a bird brain, and like I don't know, like they don't know any better. Like they're doing their best, but they don't know. Like they themselves need guidance, and they're themselves are flawed. And
kind of comes back to the whole like don't hide your sin, confess it. That again, another theme that we could talk about for hours.
And that repentance. I mean, Triton actually shows full, true repentance in the sense that he repents of not listening to her and saying, okay, I'm going to then grant what she wants in a proper time, in a proper way, right? Her trying to go around me, trying to go behind my back, using the occult to do so is not the way to go about it. But now that I've seen this man's character, now that I understand a little bit more of what she wants, like he repents of that shutting her down and not listening to her aspect of his personality, where I think he was slightly flawed. But so you actually see that repentance, as you were saying, Maddy, the self-sacrifice thing. Ariel even acknowledges that. She realizes, okay, she says, "What would I pay to do this?" And then it's, "What would her father pay to save her from her own mistakes?" And he says, "I will lay down my life." And I think that was a huge turning point for her in understanding that her father does love her. They may not always agree on what's best for her, but he, in the greater love hath no man than that he would lay down his life for his friends. Her father exhibits that for her. And that's, as you were saying, is the Christ analogy. That's another big, easy thing to point to, is that idea, that self-sacrifice, as you said. So, obviously there's a lot more that can be talked about. There's a lot more that can be parsed out. How would you reject certain ideas that this movie might present, reject the way that the movie presents them, discuss them differently? What pieces can we receive? What pieces can we spin around? Oh, you know what? I think they meant that this way, but I would actually spin it and point it back toward scriptural understanding of these ideas. So I would say keep the conversation going. I don't know what the next episode is going to be. Do you guys have any of that information, or is it?
It might be Spider-Verse.
Oh, is it Into the Spider-Verse? Okay.
Yeah, should be Spider-Verse. And then after that, you tell us.
Listeners,
if you're not already a patron, then could get your dollar ready, and because the nominations will be going up soon. This time, all on Patreon. It's been a bit difficult for me to go and tally up everything. So I realized, I was like, wait, I could just collect it in one place. So the nominations are gonna only be on Patreon instead of in the Facebook group and the Discord, and I have to try to compile them all, and it takes too long.
Poor Becky, she has a lot of work.
That's true. But for that $1 a month, you can influence us in ways that aren't devious and manipulative like Ursula, but you can influence us into what movies you'd like us to cover and what themes you might see, and speak into that. So we would love to hear from you. We would love to discuss with you, and I think we might even have some summer merch coming along. Later this month, we might be changing up some merch. So if you want to wear Popcorn Theology on your person and spark a conversation that way, please do. We would be
got more dollars than got the merch. If you want more than $1, got to go to that marketplace, and maybe you'll see Jody Benson handing off a
dingle hopper.
Yeah, passing of the torch.
Yeah.
Which was a lovely little moment for those of us in the know. We're like,
yes.
I didn't recognize her the first time, and then the second time I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. I had to tell my friend because we were watching it and she had no reaction. I was like, hey, did you know that's the original Little Mermaid? And she's like, oh, really?
No, I did appreciate that. Let us know what merch you might like. Let us know potentially what other episodes or movies you want us to talk about. And until then, keep engaging movies with a godly worldview. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Sha-la-la-la-la-la, don't be scared. You got the mood prepared. Go on and kiss the girl. Wow. Don't try to hide it how you wanna kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, float along and listen to this song. This song say kiss the girl. Sha-la-la-la-la, the music play. Do what the music say. You gotta kiss the girl.